The stars looked different from the observation deck of the USS Odyssey. Captain Frank Miller stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the distant sun of Tau Ceti grow larger as they approached. After 20 years in space exploration, he still felt wonder at each new corner of the universe they uncovered. "Captain, you should see this." The voice belonged to Lisa Ward, his diplomatic officer. Her usually calm face showed excitement as she handed him a data pad. Frank looked at the readings. "Are these confirmed?" "Triple-checked, sir. We're picking up artificial signals, strong ones." The year was 2157. Humanity had spread throughout the solar system, with thriving colonies on Mars and Europa. But despite decades of searching, they had never found intelligent alien life. Until now. "Alert the crew. Prepare first contact protocols," Frank ordered. "And get Alan up here. I want our best science officer on this." Within hours, the source of the signals appeared on their scanners. A massive ship, at least 5 times the size of the Odyssey, emerged from behind one of Tau Ceti's outer planets. Its design was unlike anything humans had built, smooth with no visible engines, glowing with a faint blue light. "They're hailing us," Communications Officer Joe Peters announced, his voice tight with tension. The bridge crew fell silent as the main screen flickered to life. The creature that appeared made several crew members gasp. It resembled a standing reptile with scaled skin in shades of green and bronze. Its eyes were large, vertical slits that seemed to take in everything at once. "I am Supreme Commander Krastal of the Zorian Imperium," the creature said, its mouth moving strangely around the English words. "We have been observing your transmissions for some time." Frank stepped forward. "I'm Captain Frank Miller of the Earth research vessel Odyssey. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship." The alien's head tilted slightly. "Yes, knowledge. We are also seekers of knowledge. Perhaps we should meet in person to discuss friendship." After the call ended, the bridge erupted in excited conversation. Alan Jackson, the science officer, couldn't stop smiling. "Do you realize what this means? First contact, and they already understand our language." Only Diane Powell, the military liaison, looked concerned. "That's what bothers me. How long have they been watching us without making contact?" Frank understood her caution, but couldn't contain his own excitement. "We're making history today. I want a delegation ready in 2 hours. Lisa, Alan, Diane, you're with me." The Zorian ship sent a small transport vessel to collect them. As they approached the massive alien mothership, Lisa whispered, "It's beautiful." The outer hull shimmered, with colors that seemed to flow like water. They docked inside a cavernous bay where several Zorians waited. Up close, the aliens were even more impressive. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, their movements fluid and precise. They were led to a large room with a curved table and strange backless seats. "Welcome," said Krastal, entering with several other Zorians. "We are pleased to meet humans in the flesh." The meeting began well. The Zorians asked questions about Earth and human society. They seemed particularly interested in human biology and history. "Your species fascinates us," said one Zorian scientist named Vexnar. "So much genetic diversity, yet so much conflict in your past." "We've worked hard to overcome our violent history," Lisa explained. "The unification of Earth and the creation of the Space Exploration Agency 50 years ago brought our nations together with a common purpose." "And yet you arm your research vessels," observed Krastal, looking at Diane in her military uniform. "Standard precaution," she replied. "Space is full of natural dangers." 4 hours into the meeting, Alan was showing the Zorians data about human colonies when he noticed something odd. Several Zorians had left the room without explanation, and Krastal kept checking a device on his wrist. "Is everything all right?" Frank asked. Krastal's expression changed subtly. The friendliness in his eyes vanished. "No, Captain Miller. Nothing is all right. Your species represents a problem for us." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Diane's hand moved closer to her sidearm. "I don't understand," Frank said. "We've shown no hostility." "It is not about hostility. Krastal stood taller. It is about evolutionary trajectory. Our scientists have studied your species extensively. You are adaptable in ways that concern us. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Alan stepped forward. If there's something about humans that worries you, we can discuss it. That's why dialogue is important. Dialogue is irrelevant, said Krastal. Our council has already decided. Humanity must be contained before you spread further. A loud alarm began to sound on Frank's communicator. Joe's panicked voice came through. Captain, they're attacking the Odyssey. Our shields are failing. The transmission cut off abruptly. Diane drew her weapon, but two Zorian guards were faster. They fired strange weapons that released bursts of energy, hitting Alan and Frank. Both men collapsed. Run! Diane shouted to Lisa, firing her gun at the nearest guard. The shot hit the Zorian in what appeared to be its shoulder, causing it to stumble. Lisa and Diane bolted for the door. Alarms began blaring throughout the Zorian ship. They raced through unfamiliar corridors, pursued by guards. This way. Diane pulled Lisa into what appeared to be a small hangar with several shuttle-like vessels. We need to get back to Earth. They have to be warned. From a viewport, they watched in horror as the Odyssey broke apart under sustained fire from the Zorian ship. Hundreds of their crewmates, friends they had lived alongside for years, gone in an instant. Tears streaming down her face, Lisa helped Diane override the controls of a small Zorian shuttle. Neither had flown alien technology before, but Diane's military training included emergency ship operations. As they pulled away from the mothership, Diane accessed the shuttle's data system. They're not just attacking us, look. The shuttle's screen showed multiple Zorian vessels appearing near Mars, Europa, and Earth itself. The attack on the Odyssey wasn't isolated. It was the opening move in a coordinated invasion. Why? Lisa whispered. We pose no threat to them. They see us as a future threat, Diane said grimly, setting a course for Earth. They said it themselves. Something about our adaptability scares them. The small shuttle accelerated away from Tau Ceti, carrying the only survivors of humanity's first contact and terrible news. Earth was under attack by an enemy they never knew existed, with technology far beyond their own. As stars streaked past the viewport, Diane checked the shuttle systems for tracking devices. They picked a fight with the wrong species, she said quietly. They may have better technology, but they don't understand humans. We don't give up, and we always fight back. Behind them, the Zorian mothership turned toward Earth, beginning its journey to join the invasion already underway. 3 months had passed since the Zorians attacked. Earth was no longer the blue-green jewel it once was. From the small window of the underground bunker, Colonel Diane Powell could see only smoke and ruins where Denver had once stood. She turned away from the depressing view and walked deeper into the facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. Soldiers saluted as she passed. Their faces showed the same mix of exhaustion and determination she felt herself. 3 months of non-stop fighting had changed everyone. The hallway led to a large room filled with maps, screens, and tired military personnel. At the center stood General Howard Grant, his gray hair now completely white from stress. Any news from the Chicago group? Diane asked. Howard shook his head. Radio silence for 2 days, but that doesn't mean they're gone. Steve knows to stay quiet when Zorian patrols are heavy. Steve Garcia had been a police officer before the invasion. Now he led one of the most effective resistance cells in the former United States. His group had managed to ambush several Zorian ground units and steal their weapons. Dr. Collins wants to see you, Howard said. Says he found something important in the wreckage you brought back last week. Diane nodded and headed toward the science section. Peter Collins had been a physicist at MIT before the war. Now he worked day and night studying Zorian technology, looking for any weakness they could exploit. The lab was crowded with broken alien equipment. Peter didn't look up when she entered. He was bent over what appeared to be a Zorian helmet, carefully taking it apart. You wanted to see me? Diane asked. Peter finally looked up, his eyes bright with excitement despite the dark circles under them. Look at this, he said, pointing to the inside of the helmet. Their equipment is designed specifically for their biology. These breathing filters, the eye coverings, they're not just for protection. I think they need them to function in our environment. You mean Earth is harmful to them? Not deadly, but uncomfortable at least. Our gravity might be stronger than they're used to, and maybe our air has elements that irritate them. He pointed to a captured video showing a Zorian whose helmet had been damaged in battle. The alien was moving slower, its reactions dulled. So if we target their environmental suits, Diane began. Exactly. We might not be able to match their ships or weapons yet, but we can make it harder for them to fight on the ground. As they discussed possible tactics, an alarm sounded. A communications officer rushed in. We're receiving a transmission from Mars Colony. It's getting through their blockade. Everyone hurried to the command center. For weeks they had heard nothing from the colonies beyond Earth. The Zorians had cut off all regular communication channels. The big screen flickered with static, then showed the face of a woman in her 30s. Her cheeks were hollow from lack of food, but her eyes were fierce. This is Karen Mitchell, communications engineer at Olympus Base on Mars. I don't know how long this channel will stay open. The colony is falling, but we've discovered something important. The transmission broke up for a moment, then returned. Their neural systems are vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. We've managed to disrupt their communications temporarily using modified mining equipment. The frequency range is... Static interrupted again. Karen, repeat the frequency. Range, Howard shouted, though she couldn't hear him. The image cleared one last time. Karen was looking over her shoulder now. Fear crossed her face. They're breaking through the doors. The range is 1.3 to 1.8. The transmission cut off completely. The room was silent for a moment. Then Howard turned to his communications team. Did we get enough? Can we use that? A young technician nodded hesitantly. 1.3 to 1.8 gigahertz most likely. It's a start, sir. Get that information to all resistance cells immediately, Howard ordered, and get Dr. Collins working on a portable version. Diane left the command center with a renewed sense of hope. For the first time since the invasion, they had found a potential advantage. Far away in Chicago, Steve Garcia and his team were unaware of this discovery. They moved quietly through the ruins of the city, avoiding Zorian patrols. Steve had been leading his group of 20 survivors for 2 months. They lived in the abandoned subway tunnels, emerging only to gather supplies or attack isolated enemy units. There's a patrol approaching the hospital, whispered Ben, his lookout. 5 of them with one of those floating weapon platforms. Steve peered through his binoculars. The Zorians moved with their usual precision, but he noticed something odd. They're moving slower today. It rained last night, said Maria, a former nurse. I've noticed they seem to struggle more in high humidity. This observation matched what they'd seen before. The Zorians appeared less comfortable in certain Earth conditions. Steve made a mental note to test this theory further. We'll skip this patrol, he decided. Too well armed. Let's head east and check the pharmacy instead. As they moved through the ruins, Steve thought about how much his life had changed. Before the invasion, his biggest concern had been making detective. Now he led raids against alien soldiers and struggled to keep his people alive each day. They reached the pharmacy without incident. While the others gathered medical supplies, Steve found a working radio in the back office. He tried several resistance frequencies but heard only static. Then suddenly, a broken transmission came through. All units discovered weakness. Electromagnetic, 1.3 to 1.8 gigahertz disrupts. Steve quickly wrote down the numbers before the transmission faded. He didn't fully understand what it meant, but any weakness in the Zorians was worth investigating. On their way back to the subway, disaster struck. A Zorian patrol appeared from a side street, cutting off their escape route. One alien raised its weapon and fired. Ben fell, clutching his shoulder. Run! Steve shouted, firing his own weapon. A modified Zorian gun they had captured weeks ago. The energy pulse hit the lead alien directly in its chest plate. The Zorian staggered but didn't fall. Maria and another team member dragged Ben toward cover while Steve provided covering fire. The aliens advanced methodically, their movements slightly stiff but still dangerous. Steve's weapon beeped a warning, low energy. He had one shot left. In desperation, he aimed at the nearest building, rather than the aliens. The blast hit an old steel support beam, causing part of the structure to collapse onto two of the Zorians. Using the confusion, Steve ran to join his team. They escaped into the maze of ruins, losing the remaining aliens after an hour of careful movement through collapsed buildings and debris-filled streets. Back in their subway hideout, Maria treated Ben's wound. "He'll live," she said. But that was too close. Steve nodded, looking at the numbers he had written down. "We need to find out what this means," he said. "And we need to establish contact with other resistance groups. We can't keep fighting alone." As night fell over the ruined city, Steve made a decision. Tomorrow they would try to reach the military bunker in the mountains that they'd heard about from other survivors. If humanity had found a weakness in their enemy, every resistance fighter needed to know about it. In his makeshift bed, Steve thought about the world before the invasion. It seemed like a dream now. Peaceful, ordinary, safe. But he didn't waste time on nostalgia. The present demanded all his attention, and if there was one thing the Zorians had learned about humans in these 3 months, it was that they never stopped fighting, never stopped adapting. The aliens had the advantage, in technology and numbers. But humans had something the Zorians didn't understand yet, determination that grew stronger with each defeat. 6 months into the war, the mountain facility buzzed with an energy it hadn't known since before the invasion. Dr. Peter Collins rushed through the hallways, nearly knocking over 2 junior scientists as he made his way to the command center. In his hand, he clutched a tablet containing data that could change everything. General Howard Grant and Colonel Diane Powell were reviewing battle reports when Peter burst in. His normally neat appearance was disheveled, his shirt untucked, hair standing on end, eyes wide with excitement. "I've got it," he said, breathing hard. "I know why they can't predict us." Howard raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Peter placed his tablet on the table and pulled up brain scan images. "These are Zorian neural patterns from our prisoner. And these," he swiped to a new image, "are human patterns. See the difference?" Diane leaned closer. "The Zorian patterns are more organized?" "Exactly. Their brains process information in highly logical sequential patterns. Everything follows clear rules. But human brains," he tapped the second image, "jump around. We make intuitive leaps. We use emotions in our decision-making. We're creative in ways they simply aren't." Howard frowned. "And this helps us how?" "It's why they attacked us in the first place," Peter explained. "They saw our unpredictability as dangerous. But it's also why their military strategies are failing against our resistance cells. They can't anticipate what we'll do, because we don't always do the logical thing." Diane sat back, letting this sink in. "So our advantage is that we're messy thinkers?" "Precisely." Peter nodded eagerly. "And we need to leverage that. Their entire military structure is rigid, hierarchical. Every soldier follows exact protocols. But we can be flexible, adaptive." Howard's eyes narrowed as he considered the implications. "You're suggesting we change our approach, move away from traditional military structure?" "For this enemy?" "Yes. Small teams with broad objectives but complete tactical freedom. Let them use human creativity against an enemy that can't handle surprises." The idea was radical, especially for career military officers like Howard and Diane. But after 6 months of devastating losses, they were ready to try anything. "Project Wildcard," Howard said finally. "That's what we'll call it. Diane, select our best officers to lead independent squads. Peter, prepare a briefing on Zorian psychology and tactical patterns. I want everyone to understand exactly how their minds work, and how ours differ." 3 days later, the first wildcard teams deployed. Among them was Steve Garcia's Chicago Resistance Cell, now officially designated Wildcard 7. They had reached the mountain facility 2 weeks earlier, bringing valuable field experience against Zorian patrols. "Remember," Steve told his team as they prepared to return to Chicago with new equipment. We're not just fighting to survive anymore. We're testing their weaknesses, gathering intelligence, and hitting targets of opportunity. But how we do it is up to us. Maria adjusted the new electromagnetic disruptor on her belt, a device based on Karen Mitchell's discovery from Mars. So basically, we make it up as we go along. That's not so different from what we've been doing. Steve smiled. Except now we're part of something bigger. Across the planet, other wildcard teams launched similarly unpredictable operations. In the ruins of Sydney, Wildcard 3 used underground tunnels to emerge behind Zorian positions, attacking their vulnerable environmental control systems rather than engaging directly. In the Amazon, Wildcard 9 used the dense jungle to ambush alien patrols, then disappeared before reinforcements arrived. But the most significant test of Project Wildcard came in space. Near Jupiter, a salvaged Zorian scout ship drifted, apparently disabled. Inside, Navy Commander Greg Foster and his crew of 12 waited silently. They had purposely broadcast distress signals to attract attention. "Contact approaching," whispered his sensor operator. "Zorian cruiser, just as we hoped." Greg nodded but said nothing. Everyone knew the plan. It was simple but dependent on perfect timing and a healthy dose of human ingenuity. The massive Zorian cruiser approached cautiously, extending docking clamps to secure the smaller vessel. The moment the ships connected, Greg gave the signal, "Now." Half his crew pushed off toward the cruiser through the docking tunnel, carrying modified mining explosives. The other half fired up the scout ship's engines at full power, pushing against the docking clamps in a way they weren't designed to handle. On the cruiser, confused Zorians rushed to respond to this unexpected development. Their protocols covered standard boarding procedures, but not this bizarre combination of actions. By the time they organized a coherent defense, Greg's team had placed explosives at key junctions and retreated. The resulting chain reaction tore through the cruiser's power systems. Greg's scout ship pulled away just as secondary explosions began. The Zorian vessel, 10 times the size of their small ship, broke apart in a series of brilliant flashes. When news of the victory reached Earth, it sparked celebrations in the mountain facility. A single salvaged scout ship with 12 humans had destroyed a major Zorian warship. Project Wildcard was working. In the aftermath, Colonel Powell led a daring raid on a Zorian command center in the Australian outback. Unlike previous operations focused solely on destruction, this mission had a different objective: capture. "We need to understand them better," Diane had explained during planning. "And that means taking one of their commanders alive." The raid succeeded beyond expectations. Using electromagnetic disruptors to confuse Zorian communications and targeting their environmental systems, Diane's team penetrated deep into the facility. They captured not only valuable data, but also a high-ranking Zorian officer. Under controlled conditions at the mountain facility, the prisoner revealed crucial information. The Zorians had conquered 17 other species across multiple star systems, but none had resisted like humans. Their carefully calculated invasion plans had assumed Earth would be beaten within weeks. They hadn't prepared for a prolonged conflict with a species that refused to surrender and kept adapting to their tactics. "Your kind makes no sense," the Zorian told Diane during one interrogation session. "You continue fighting when all logical outcomes indicate your defeat." "Why?" Diane had smiled. "Because we're human. Logic isn't everything to us. Hope matters more." The Zorian had no response to this concept. Its species valued order, predictability, and clear hierarchies. The chaos of human resistance, different groups using different tactics, constant innovation, and seemingly irrational decisions that sometimes yielded surprising results, disrupted their entire approach to warfare. The 6th month of war ended. Humanity remained endangered but was no longer helpless. Project Wildcard teams operated worldwide, striking Zorian forces in ways they couldn't anticipate. Dr. Collins continued studying captured technology, making breakthrough after breakthrough. Howard coordinated these scattered efforts into a coherent strategy. For the first time since the invasion began, humans allowed themselves to feel something that had nearly been extinguished: hope. They were still outgunned and outnumbered, but they had found their advantage. The very unpredictability that had made the Zorians fear humanity was becoming their greatest weapon. The tide hadn't turned yet, but the first signs of change were visible. The Zorians had picked a fight with the wrong species, and now humanity was learning how to strike back. 1 year had passed since the Zorians first attacked Earth. In that year, humanity had changed more than in the previous century. Cities lay in ruins, billions were dead, but the human spirit remained unbroken. In fact, it had grown stronger. Colonel Diane Powell stood in the newly established command center near what was once Seattle. The original mountain facility had been discovered and destroyed 3 months ago, but by then, humanity had learned not to keep all their leadership in one place. Now they operated from a dozen hidden bases around the world, connected by secure communications that Dr. Collins had designed based on Zorian technology. Operation Boomerang is ready, she told General Howard Grant, who appeared on her screen from his position in the Australian outback. All teams report green status. Howard nodded. His face looked older, more lined, but his eyes burned with the same determination. Then we proceed at dawn. Remind all commanders, maximum unpredictability. Let the teams use their own judgment once targets are assigned. Operation Boomerang represented the largest coordinated human offensive since the war began. After a year of studying Zorian technology, tactics, and weaknesses, humanity was finally ready to hit back hard. Dr. Collins entered the room, his tablet displaying complex diagrams. Once a pure academic, he now moved with the confidence of a man who had seen his theories tested in battle. The Prometheus protocol is ready, he said. Karen's work was the key. Karen Mitchell had survived the fall of Mars colony and made it back to Earth 6 months ago. Her insights into Zorian neural interfaces had proven invaluable. Together with Peter, she had developed a virus designed to infiltrate Zorian networks and disrupt their neural machine connections. Will it work across their entire fleet? Diane asked. That depends on how interconnected their systems are, Peter replied. But any ship that receives the signal will be affected. Their neural interfaces will experience significant disruption, not permanent but enough to give us an edge for several hours. Diane checked the time. 6 hours until dawn. 6 hours until humanity launched its counteroffensive across the globe and throughout the solar system. Get some rest, she told Peter. Tomorrow will be the most important day of the war. In Chicago, Steve Garcia prepared his team for their role in Operation Boomerang. Wildcard 7 had grown from 20 to over 50 members, a mix of former civilians and military personnel. They had become experts at urban warfare against the Zorians. Our target is their main communications hub in the city center, he explained, pointing to a map. We won't have much time once the Prometheus protocol activates. Their systems will only be disrupted for a few hours. Maria, now his second in command, studied the building layout. The west entrance looks least defended. Steve shook his head. Which means they'll expect an attack there. We'll go in through the roof. They never look up enough. This was the kind of thinking that had kept them alive and fighting. Do the unexpected. Avoid patterns. Think like a human, not like a Zorian. In orbit around Earth, Commander Greg Foster received the final approval for his part of the operation. His single captured scout ship had become a small fleet of 12 vessels, some repurposed human, ships retrofitted with Zorian technology. Others captured alien craft. His crew had mastered the alien systems through trial and error, often improving on the original designs. All ships confirm receipt of the Prometheus protocol package, his communications officer reported. Ready to broadcast on your command. Greg looked at the tactical display showing Zorian positions throughout the solar system. They still outnumbered human forces significantly, but they had grown complacent. They hadn't faced a coordinated large-scale attack before. Remind all captains, he said, standard formations until the protocol activates. Then execute wildcard maneuvers as planned. As dawn broke over North America, Operation Boomerang began. Simultaneously across Earth and throughout the solar system, human forces launched their attacks. The first phase appeared conventional, direct assaults on known Zorian positions, The aliens responded with their usual efficiency, moving reinforcements according to their standard protocols. Then, precisely 2 hours into the battle, Dr. Collins activated the Prometheus protocol. The virus spread through Zorian communications, networks, targeting their neural interfaces. Across the battlefield, alien soldiers and pilots suddenly found themselves disconnected from their command networks and struggling to control their advanced technology. In Chicago, Steve's team reached the communications hub just as the protocol took effect. They encountered Zorians moving clumsily, their normally precise actions now uncoordinated. Taking advantage of the confusion, his team placed explosives at key structural points rather than engaging in direct combat. "Fall back," Steve ordered, as the charges were set. 30 seconds. They retreated to a safe distance and watched as the building collapsed, taking out the central communication node for the entire Midwest region. Similar scenes played out in cities worldwide as wildcard teams struck critical Zorian infrastructure. In space, Greg's fleet executed their part of the plan with precision. While the Zorians struggled with their suddenly unreliable systems, the Yao, human ships attacked in seemingly random patterns. They targeted propulsion systems rather than weapons, communications arrays rather than life support. The goal wasn't to destroy the alien vessels, but to cripple their ability to coordinate. 1. A Zorian battleship, larger than all of Greg's fleet combined, found itself surrounded by 5 smaller human-piloted craft. Unable to predict which vital system would be targeted next, its commander divided his defenses too thinly. Greg personally led the assault team that boarded the vessel through a damaged shuttle bay. "Remember," he told his boarding team, "we want this ship intact." Fighting through the corridors against disoriented Zorian crew members, Greg's team reached the bridge. The alien commander, unable to receive guidance from the hierarchy he relied upon, surrendered rather than risk the destruction of his vessel. For the first time, humans had captured a Zorian battleship intact. The technology aboard would advance, human understanding by years. In Australia, Colonel Powell led her own attack on a major Zorian ground base. The aliens had established it as their Southern Hemisphere command center, believing its remote location provided security. They hadn't counted on humans who knew the terrain intimately. Diane's forces approached through seemingly impassable desert, using routes known only to Aboriginal guides who had joined the resistance. When the Prometheus protocol activated, they struck from multiple directions simultaneously. The Zorian defenders, accustomed to fighting with neural enhancements that provided instant tactical updates, found themselves forced to rely on their own senses and judgment. The battle lasted 3 hours. By the end, Diane stood in the captured command center, watching as human technicians worked to secure Zorian data systems before the aliens could remotely destroy them. "We've done it," said her communications officer. Reports coming in from all sectors. Operation Boomerang is a success across the board. The Zorian prison compound connected to the base yielded thousands of human captives, many of whom had been subjects of alien experiments seeking to understand human adaptability. Among them were scientists and military personnel thought lost in the early days of the war. Their knowledge and skills would further strengthen the resistance. As night fell over Australia, Diane received a transmission from General Grant. His face showed fatigue, but also something she hadn't seen in months: genuine joy. "The tide is turning," he said simply. "For the first time, they're retreating on multiple fronts, not regrouping, retreating." Diane allowed herself a small smile. "One battle doesn't win a war." "No," Howard agreed. "But it shows we can win. The Zorians know it too. They're learning what happens when you pick a fight with the wrong species." 18 months after the invasion began, Earth looked different. The ruins remained, but among them, humans had built new structures using a mix of their own and Zorian technology. Cities were slowly coming back to life. The skies, once filled with alien ships, now saw human vessels patrolling alongside captured Zorian craft. Colonel Diane Powell stood on the deck of the captured battleship, now called Freedom. The massive vessel had been redesigned to accommodate human pilots and crews. Commander Greg Foster had supervised the conversion personally, before taking command of humanity's growing space fleet. "They're retreating across the solar system," Greg reported, showing Diane the tactical display. Red dots representing Zorian forces were moving away from Earth, Mars, and the other colonies. But intelligence suggests they're gathering for one final push. Diane nodded. The victories of the past 6 months had exceeded all expectations. Operation Boomerang had broken the Zorian hold on Earth. The Prometheus protocol had proven so effective that Dr. Collins had developed several variants, each exploiting different weaknesses in alien systems. "Supreme Commander Krazital won't accept defeat easily," she said. "His entire career is built on conquest. He's never lost before." "Well, he's about to learn what that feels like," Greg replied. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from General Grant. "We've detected a massive Zorian fleet approaching Earth. Looks like everything they have left in the solar system. They'll be within strike range in 6 hours." Back on Earth, in the Seattle Command Center, Howard gathered his senior officers. Among them was Steve Garcia, recently promoted to major for his success leading urban warfare against the Zorians. "This is it," Howard told them. "Their final desperate move. They're committing everything they have left." Dr. Collins frowned at the tactical displays. "The fleet is too large for our current forces to handle conventionally. Even with our captured ships and technology, they outnumber us 3-1. "Then we don't fight conventionally," Steve said. "We've never won by playing their game. We win by changing the rules." Howard nodded. "Precisely. And I believe it's time for our most audacious change yet." He turned to Peter. "Is Strike Team Alpha ready?" Peter smiled. "Colonel Powell can launch within the hour." As the Zorian fleet approached Earth, Supreme Commander Krazital stood on the bridge of his flagship. His forces had been pushed back repeatedly by the humans, something he had never believed possible. His career, his reputation, his standing among his people, all were now at risk. "All ships in attack formation," reported his second-in-command. "We will reach Earth in 5 hours." Krazital stared at the blue planet growing larger on his view screen. "This ends today. We will break their resistance once and for all. No more holding back. Full planetary bombardment of all human settlements." His officers looked at each other uneasily. Such an attack would make Earth uninhabitable, something their own leadership council had forbidden. They wanted to conquer Earth, not destroy it. "Sir," his second-in-command began, "the council's directives." "The council is not here," Krazital hissed. "I will not be the first Supreme Commander to lose a war, especially not to primitive humans." What Krazital didn't know was that his communications were being monitored. Strike Team Alpha, led by Colonel Powell, had already infiltrated his fleet using a captured Zorian scout ship. Their target was not just any vessel, it was Krazital's flagship itself. Diane and her small team of 12 specialists had trained for months for this mission. Using captured Zorian armor modified to hide their human life signs, they had boarded the flagship during a brief window when its shields were reconfigured for faster travel. Now they moved through service tunnels toward the command deck, guided by detailed schematics provided by the Zorian prisoner they had captured months ago in Australia. Their mission: capture Krazital alive and force a Zorian surrender. "Guards ahead," whispered Lisa Ward, who had been with Diane since the first contact with the Zorians on the USS Odyssey. In the 18 months since, she had transformed from a diplomatic officer into a hardened soldier. Diane signaled for the team to hold position. Then she activated a small device Dr. Collins had created, a localized version of the Prometheus protocol that affected only Zorian neural implants within a 20-foot radius. The guards suddenly clutched their heads in pain as their neural systems went haywire. Before they could recover, Diane's team neutralized them with stun weapons designed specifically for Zorian physiology. "Command deck is through those doors," Lisa said, checking the schematics on her wrist device. Diane nodded to her explosives expert, who placed breaching charges on the sealed doors. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. The doors blew inward. "Strike." Team Alpha rushed onto the command deck, stun weapons firing rapidly. Most of the Zorian officers fell before they could react. Only Supreme Commander Krazital managed to draw his weapon. "Surrender," Diane ordered, her weapon aimed at his chest. "Humans," Krastal spat the word. "I should have bombed your planet into dust when we first found you." "But you didn't," Diane replied. "And now it's too late." With the command deck secured, Lisa accessed the ship's communication system. She broadcast a predetermined message to the Zorian fleet, along with images of their captured Supreme Commander. At the same time, Earth's combined defense forces launched, a mix of human ships and captured Zorian vessels. They formed a protective line between Earth and the approaching fleet. On the flagship's command deck, Diane confronted Krastal with evidence they had gathered over months of fighting. "You lied to your own people," she said, displaying internal Exorian communications they had intercepted. "This war wasn't about humans being an evolutionary threat, it was about your fear." "Fear?" Krastal hissed. "The Zorian Empire fears nothing." "Not the Empire," Diane corrected. "You, your leadership caste. You feared what humans would become, not now, but centuries from now. You saw our creativity, our adaptability, and you recognized something your controlled society had lost long ago." The accusations hit home. Among the Zorian officers on the deck, a tall figure named Vexnar stepped forward. He had been watching the exchange carefully. "Is this true, Supreme Commander?" he asked. "Was this war launched based on projections rather than immediate threat?" "The projections were clear," Krastal insisted. "Given time, humans would spread through the galaxy, challenging our dominance. And so, you ordered our fleet to destroy a species that had shown us no hostility," Vexnar said quietly. "Billions of our soldiers have died fighting a war based on your fear of what might happen centuries from now." Other officers began murmuring among themselves. Diane recognized the moment for what it was, division in the Zorian ranks. She had counted on this when planning the mission. "This war can end today," she told them. "Humanity doesn't seek the destruction of the Zorian people. We only want our freedom and our world back." Vexnar looked from Diane to Krastal and back. Then he made his choice. "I am assuming command of this fleet," he announced. "Supreme Commander Krastal is relieved of duty pending investigation by the Council." Two Zorian officers moved to restrain Krastal, who looked stunned by this sudden turn of events. "All ships," Vexnar ordered into the fleet communication system. "Stand down weapons. Cease advancement toward Earth. The war is over." The ceasefire took effect immediately. Within hours, representatives from both species began discussing terms for Zorian withdrawal from the solar system. 3 days later, Diane stood with General Grant, Dr. Collins, Commander Foster, and Major Garcia as they watched the Zorian fleet depart. They left behind a changed Earth, damaged but unbowed, and now in possession of technology that would have taken centuries to develop independently. "Do you think they'll come back?" Steve asked, watching the ships vanish into the darkness of space. "Not for a very long time," Howard replied. "They learned an expensive lesson." Diane thought about the entire 18-month ordeal, from first contact to final victory. "They picked a fight with the wrong species," she said quietly. "And now they know it." As the last Zorian ship disappeared from view, humanity looked to the stars with new eyes. No longer were they just tiny beings on a small blue planet. They had faced extinction and survived. They had faced a technologically superior enemy and won. The stars were no longer just points of light. They were destinations. And humanity, tested by fire, was ready to claim its place among them.